Chapter 12. Crespi took a deep breath, held it, and pushed the handles of the press machine up slowly. His arms trembled, sweat ran in rivulets down and across his neck. Final rep, second set, and he could feel the strain across his shoulders and back, the low spreading ache that meant he was doing good. He exhaled and brought the weight down, forcing air out gradually between clenched teeth. 10, he rasped, and released the handles. Not bad, considering. The stimulators in the sleep chambers were adequate, but some atrophy was inevitable. Though he was almost back to pressing his own body weight, closer than he could have hoped so soon after the deep sleep. He lay there for a moment, catching his breath, and thought about what McGinnis had told him. 34 crew members dead. How many had been connected to Church's research? He'd said none, but they had all died of heart attacks. Impossible. No. Church was holding back, and it looked like Thaves had to be involved. There was no way that many could be kept a secret. And why not? You wouldn't have known without McGinnis's prying, and it's still a secret to the brass back home. Was it? Crespi considered and rejected the idea in a few seconds. Conspiracy theories were fine for fiction, but this was real life. Besides, if the Corps were in on it, they wouldn't bother running their tests way the hell out here, or with civilian techs. They'd keep it closer to home, and with their own people. Church. He was decidedly eccentric, but was he also so flat-out nuts that he would kill human beings for the sake of his research? He was working on telepathic communication between man and alien in order to save people. And what the hell would he do with a slew of corpses anyway? Then there was Mortensen. It seemed probable that he had been murdered, but why? Had he stumbled across something he shouldn't have? Crespi sighed deeply and ran his hand through his sweat-soaked hair. Too many questions, and the only answers didn't make sense. Unless... Sharon McGinnis. Her story about David Lennox rang true, and it was a reasonable motive to dig. But he only had her word that any of this was going on. Her word, and an old snapshot that showed her standing with a Colonel Doctor who she claimed was Church's old assistant. He rejected that one too. His gut instinct was that she was one of the good guys on this, and her angry outburst back in the mess cinched it for him. He would have done the same thing if his lover had died under such mysterious circumstances. Damn the consequences. And he also would have mouthed off to anyone who berated him for it. So what was happening aboard the Innominata? There were too many pieces missing to even hazard a guess, but what he had so far didn't smell too good. In fact, it stank out loud. He sat up and reached for a towel, glancing at the clock set into the wall. It was a decent gym. He'd sweated plenty. He was ready for a shower, maybe a bite, and then he'd meet with Church, maybe feel him out about Mortensen's death. He didn't want the doctor to know what he had so far, the rest of it, but a little scoping might yield something useful. Outside in the corridor, a woman screamed in terror. Crespi jumped up from the bench and snatched his gym bag as the cry was joined by others. "Run! Get away! Oh my God! Where is it?" Crespi dug through the bag frantically, past toiletries and clothing, his hand wrapped around the machine pistol, and then he was running out into the passageway. "Get it away! Oh God, keep it back!" Crespi charged into the hall, aimed at the centre of the commotion, heart pounding, and froze. It was Paul Church, smiling, holding a leash, with an alien drone at the other end. Church sang to the little drone as they walked down the level B corridor. A song he only half remembered from his youth. Mostly he hummed, throwing in the few words he recalled when they seemed appropriate. "Hey day diddly the cat and the spoon, dog eats moon." The creature scrabbled frantically for purchase at the slick floor, its cries muffled by the metal harness's bit. Church gripped the extended and insulated handle in one hand, the discipline cord in the other. Each time the drone veered away from him, Church tapped the cord switch, delivering a heavy electric jolt through the contraption. It worked perfectly, The metal casing enveloped both the shoulders of the writhing drone and ran down the length of its spine, forcing it into a four-legged walk. A welded rod extended from each shoulder and met in front of the jaws, where it curved inward to effectively muzzle the beast. Of course, there was a slight drooling problem, but some things couldn't be helped. They'd certainly be easy to track, though. Just follow the puddles, Trix? He called over his shoulder to Blackman, who followed along from a distance. Don't slip! Our doggy seems to be quite salivous this morning. The drone tried another lunge forward, and Church shocked it, frowning. Bad! No! The voltage wasn't as high as he'd installed in the kennels, certainly. Taking the beast for a drag was not what he'd had in mind. No, it was a love tap, just a hint of debilitating pain, enough to keep little Trixie on its toes, so to speak. They passed a few people in the corridor, most of whom grew pale and disappeared quickly in spite of Church's reassuring demeanour. He wasn't surprised, really, though it was regretful. Drones could be quite nasty, given the correct circumstances. But not today, Trixie. You're mine today. The sense of power was amazing, and Church felt almost high with it. It was his first attempt at harnessing one of the creatures, forcing it to his will, while still being close enough to smell its acrid, musky scent. There was no question of who was in control, none whatsoever, although the few passing faces seemed to think differently. Let them think what they will. In the end, I still hold the reins, and you're still crawling in front of me. They turned the corner and headed down Corridor 5, where the station's small exercise room was. Crespi had mentioned a workout. Perhaps he'd still be there, would see what Church was doing, and would forget all that sub-rosa silliness with the McGinnis woman. How could a man, a scientist no less, care about piddling secrets when the power of the beast was right in front of them? Hey, little blue, there in the corn. Better hide your laugh, dog eats moon. There was a woman tech midway down the passage, kneeling at a control panel set into the floor. Church gently steered the drone to the other side of the hall so as not to upset her, but they were only a few meters away before she happened to look up, and screamed to wake the dead. A few others farther along the corridor turned and saw the situation, then added to the false alarm by adding their own panicked voices. Church cringed. Couldn't they see? Were their eyes shadowed so heavily by their own prejudice? The silly, screaming woman had backed herself against the wall and now pleaded for Church to take it away. He sighed heavily. Don't be afraid of Trixie, ma'am. He won't bite. She didn't seem to hear him, too caught in her own hysterical drama, lost in the sound of her own high-pitched complaints. A burst of movement ahead, and his drone strained at the leash. Someone had run into the hall, pointing a weapon at them. Church grinned. Crespi, of course, all pumped up and drenched in a manly sweat. The look on the poor man's face was priceless. He lowered his weapon, and his words carried clearly to Church's ears. What the fuck? The drone suddenly lunged again, no doubt agitated by Crespi's offensive stance. Church zapped it, felt that small burst of pleasure as the creature writhed, its cries strangled and weak beneath the muzzle. Bad, he said again. Crespi's stunned silence didn't last. He moved closer to Church, though not too close, and practically shouted in anger. What in the holy hell are you doing? Wasn't it obvious? Just taking Trixie for a walk, he said, but he could see already that the humour in the situation wasn't reaching Crespi. Crespi's face contorted into a snarl of rage. A walk? I should arrest you on the spot. Church frowned. Arrest me? For what? For what? How about improper handling of contraband life forms, reckless endangerment, felony jeopardization, conduct unbearing an officer? How about criminal insanity? Church was taken aback. I was trying to make a point, he began, but Crespi cut him off. What in the name of Buddha could that be? Church suddenly felt a bit angry. That I have these creatures completely under my control, he said coolly. That they offer no threat. Crespi still looked furious. Tell that to Mortensen. God, did Mortensen die just so it could be thrown in Church's face? He was a fool who got himself killed by being where he had no business being. Church turned around, found Blackman standing with a few other watchers. Blackman, prepare the holding cell. Yes, sir. He wheeled the drone around and started back to the kennel, the crew members scattering from the alien's path. Crespi obviously had no imagination and no appreciation for the simple, pleasurable benefits of his research. That would have to change if they were going to be working together, but would he ever overcome his tendency towards emotional reaction? Looks like we'll have to teach him a few things, he whispered, but the alien paid no mind. It drooled and lunged, its talons scratching grooves into the worn passage floor beneath it. Church sighed and depressed the buzzer again.